Hi, this is Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So, today I wanted to talk about words of power. Um, I've been thinking about this experience that I had in 1976. I'm thinking my daughter was born in 1975, so it was somewhere between 75 and 76 that this happened because she was an infant at the time. And it's sort of, as usual, one of those things that's difficult to describe. But I was nursing her in bed. Now, people wouldn't do that, but back then we did. And I was never worried that I was going to roll over on her or anything. Anyway, I was pretty exhausted because you don't get much sleep um, when they're really little. And a lot of times when I don't get much sleep, I'm more open to certain kinds of experiences because I'm sort of unfocused a fair amount on physical reality. So it sort of separates me out in different bodies of mine, I guess, the astral and mental body and the akasha and so forth. So it was very unexpected, and I wasn't sure what exactly to make of it at the time. Still don't know exactly what to make of it. Like everything else, it's open to interpretation. But as I was trying to fall back to sleep with my daughter in my arms, I suddenly found myself somewhen and somewhere else. And I think I was also someone else. Later, it seemed that what I was experiencing was a memory from my guardian spirit, Moida. That's actually the how I put it at the time. It was like not long after this happened. And so I found myself standing at the center of a circle of people or spirit beings, I'm not sure, at the base of a very large tree. This tree was like, had, it was huge. It made a very natural circle around it, the way the branches were formed. And so I was there right at the trunk. And the other people were there to witness what happened next. And then sounds, colors came out of my mouth, if that's what I had. And each utterance was actually a word, um, like the original word for everything. I did one word at a time, and the word, when it came out, would have within it sounds and shapes and colors and whatnot, would be the naming of the thing in time and space and its relationship to all other things in the universe. So if you knew its name, you knew everything about it. It's like, I thought of this as like the original language, the language of creation, when things were brought into being and became more real. Um, and it seemed that up until that moment, things didn't have a name. They just were. And because they didn't have a name, there was no sense of time. Uh, Everything was just in the now. There was like no memory of the past, no thought of the future. everything was just now. And so when you saw a plant, um, it existed just in that moment as whatever it looked like. If it was a seed, it existed just as a seed and had always been a seed and would always be a seed. If it had started to grow, it existed in that stage of its development and had always been in that stage of a development and would always be in that stage of development. If it was flowering, same thing. And there was no way to connect the different events. They were not connected as being part of the same thing. Each thing was separate and only in that instant. So there would be no way to communicate with anyone about it, or to compare it to anything else, since nothing had a name until then. And I think that whatever this experience was, whether it was metaphorical or an actual spiritual experience of the birthing of our languages, that from that moment on was the beginning of memory, because it's only through naming things and identifying things that we can remember things. And so I think that that's where um, a lot of the ideas and notions that if you know the true name of something, you have power over it, originated, because in that moment, knowing the true name of something, its original name, meant that you knew everything about it, all the things that you needed to know or could ever know about that thing. And knowledge is power. So it's not like you had power over the thing, like to control it, but you had power of understanding of the thing. And as languages started to evolve and separate out and change, we kind of lost that connected language. I think that the Kabbalah is left over of that, the idea of the Kabbalah. And Barden's Key to the True Kabbalah definitely talks about that as being like part of the birth of creation. And if you could learn how to say those words again, then you would have a much greater understanding and connectedness to everything that was out there. But it's complicated. It's not easy. And the individual letters and groups of letters have to be pronounced in a certain sound, in a certain color, in a certain sphere. It's extremely complicated. At that point, I didn't know that much about the Kabbalah or anything else. That this was just a spontaneous, incredible, moving experience that's difficult to describe. And so, but it gave me a lot of food for thought. So we've talked about language, communication, words on a number of occasions, and how they can separate us, and how dangerous labels can be because they can limit us. So that's the opposite end of language, is like we can use language now not to create, but to like define and limit and make smaller. So we have to try and keep in touch with that whole notion of broadening our concept of naming things and language and everything else. Some people think that the language that you use to do spell work or magic matters. Like one language is going to be better to use than others. For example, someone asked today, as a matter of fact, whether using Latin in their spell work would make a spell more powerful. And the answer is not necessarily, because from that understanding of the creation, language of creation, which would be the rawest form of magic out there, it's clear to me that without an understanding and a connection to that language, then they just become words. Words on their own nowadays don't have that kind of power. And those words were different. They weren't words, they were song and vibration and all sorts of other things. I mean, it was like different. Again, hard to describe, but definitely there. So, words, sound of any kind, not just words, is associated with the throat chakra. And being able to say things and putting those words out there still has that ability to travel in time and space and affect things, but only if you have the understanding of the words themselves and how to use them that way. The throat chakra can be wonderful and incredible as far as your ability to communicate with other people is concerned, and like everything else in the world can be misused. And someone who has no personal ethics, no center of their place in the universe, can use the ability to speak to sway people to their particular view. We see this in politics and in religion all the time. People use their ability of oratory and to inflame other people's ideas or thoughts or feelings or emotions and to sway them to their side. And that is, I consider, a misuse of the ability. If your throat center is open and you are in a good, centered, grounded place, then that ability can be used to convey an idea and a thought without using it to try and make someone conform with your notion of what reality should be shaped like. So, one of the reasons for using chants, whether they're like the Garuda chant that we got from Garuda himself to protect us against potential attack, or, you know, from people who would think ill of us for whatever reason. The words themselves lead your thoughts and your energy in a specific direction and help you to visualize what it is that you want to have. So, you know, whether it's the claws and teeth and fire and beak of, or I guess he doesn't have teeth, so claws and wings and fire and beak of the form of protection. Speaking it helps you to visualize what it is that you want, and then repeating it helps you to charge up the words and charge up the chant and charge up the saying. So it's like in India, when someone is given a mantra for a specific purpose, generally speaking, they activate that mantra by repeating it 100,000 or more times. So even without that kind of comprehension, you can get results from a repeated phrasing of something. But with the actual understanding of it, you can get the same result but quicker. I mean, it's like if you are understanding what you're doing, then that changes the level of the power that you're accessing. nowadays there are so many different languages and so many different definitions of similar words and so forth that it's easy to get misunderstood or to misunderstand what someone else is saying, because we're not using telepathy as much as we probably did in way back in the day, and so we're using words to convey something that's inside of us, to externalize it in order to share it and give it to someone else, or in order to put it out in the universe to affect the energy that we're putting out to the universe, which then in turn affects the energy of the universe coming back towards us. It's kind of like you're putting out this you're creating a pattern that then the universe can adapt to and follow. It's like pretty much that's what a spell really is creating a pattern for the universe to follow. And the better able you are to define the pattern and leave it open-ended as far as the results go, the better results you tend to get from the universe. Because if you define things too much, then you limit the potential responses that the universe can have to what you've done. So someone had asked a question at one point about the differences between prayer, wishes, and spell work, which is along the same lines as this, because they all use words or intense feelings or both in order to go with them. So in my mind, if you are using words to try and connect with a specific deity, those words are what they're supposed to do, what you want them to do, is to open up that pathway through that universal mind to direct your energy towards the energy you're trying to connect with, and then get your message across and open up the lines of communication coming back so that you can hear things coming back the other way. So a prayer is generally a non-specific wish, or it can be a specific wish, but it's more like, well, I'm going to put energy into hoping this thing will work out, and I'm going to leave it all up to the universe, whether it's a god or a goddess or just Mother Earth or just the universe itself. It's not as defined and precise and focused. It's, just sort of like, I'd like this. This would be nice if this would happen. And a wish is similar. A wish is more general than a prayer. Usually prayers are a little bit more specific. And, prayers don't have to be religious. They can just be that statement of desire for something to happen, for something to go in a new direction, for something to change, for greater understanding of your circumstances and what's going on with you, for understanding of another person, whatever it happens to be. So a spell is more of a designed prayer, in a sense, or designed wish. Like you take the thing you're trying to accomplish and then you try to break it down into its components, like what are the steps I need to do to get from here to there, what forces are the kinds of forces that I want to rally around myself in order to give me momentum to go in that direction. So like one of the reasons why we have different associations with planetary energies is because we have decided, or we have learned, that the different planets have different types of energy that we can access if we're paying attention and if we're focused on it. So if we're focused on solar kinds of things, then we focus on the sun energy, and the sun energy will like push things outward, make things brighter, expansion. It's like it's all about that. So each of the planets has got its thing. So if you're trying to design a spell for being noticed or even not noticed, it can work both ways, then solar energy could be a good thing for you to focus on. I'm getting unfocused here, trying to figure out how to explain what I'm talking about. But people have a tendency to like things to have their place in their world. So, it's like if all they've experienced is one particular kind of lifestyle, then someone else's lifestyle that's very different from theirs is threatening to them, because then they have to look at the fact that there's different kinds of ways of living. People are funny that way. I don't personally understand it. I think it's great. I like variety. I think it's wonderful that people are different. But that need to control the environment is one of the ways that we use labels in order to put people where they belong in our mind, so that then we don't have to think about them. Like when I changed my name, I rattled strangers as well as family, because then suddenly they had to think about what my name was each time they talked to me or communicated with me, because I wasn't called the same thing anymore, which gave me an opportunity to redefine myself, is what I wanted it for. It's like it's an opportunity to redefine who I am without the baggage of everyone's definition of who I was, which was associated with my name. So changing names of things can have a lot of power to them as well, because you're allowing yourself to redefine your own reality and your universe. The difficulty or the danger of the label is not just on yourself, which also happens. You limit yourself by your own labels, but on others, so that then you're not being in the moment and you're not seeing them for who they are, because people do change. There's things about them that change, and people can change, although it takes a lot of effort. Change doesn't happen automatically by itself. It's not like something you just grow into becoming different. You have to actually be working at becoming more of who you already are, being your authentic self, which is something difficult to define. Only you know what that is. And that doesn't mean that you become perfect, or that nothing ever bothers you, or that you don't make mistakes, because that's a whole part of the process of exploring, becoming, being, and all that stuff. So people will put words in your head, like what happened to me when I got shingles, and my friend said that if I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have any kind of luck at all. That was something that was stuck. She put it in my head, and then I had to decide what I was going to do with that piece of information, because now it's there, and I need to deconstruct this phrasing and then challenge the different parts and then choose if any of it's true or valid or reasonable or helpful or useful or whatever to me, in this case, it's not. But if I don't do that, then it just sort of sinks down into that. And that's the thing, is like one of the reasons for the work that we do, the grounding and the centering and the meditation, has to do with being able to notice those influences that we have from others that turn into negative influences for the direction that our energy wants to move, or who we are wants to go. We do things for other people. It's not a bad thing to help other people. That's not what we're saying here. But we need to know why we're doing it, and be doing it for the right reasons, and not be doing it to expect them to act in a certain way back. And that's another thing. It's like most people, when they say, I'm going to do you a favor, and then they do you this favor, then they expect that you're going to repay that favor the way they want the favor to come back, and not necessarily, let it go forward in time and have you repay that favor to someone else, which is, I think, is great that we've now got that in our language, the paying it forward, which is the idea that one person can help someone else, and then that person can help someone else not the same person that helped them. But there's a lot of times when people say things to us with an expectation that we're going to react or respond in a specific way, and if we don't, they get angry. Because again, it's like they're defining their universe based on these principles, these words, these ideas, these notions, and we're not conforming to the construct that they're familiar with or comfortable with or want, and are trying to promote, then we're rocking their boat, and people tend to react negatively to having their boat rocked. So that's one of the reasons for the shadow work too. Is the shadow work part of that has to do with identifying those things that trigger us in specific ways. Like, so I was born in 1950, and racism was out in the open. There was no hiding it. Negative words about all other races were being used on a daily basis by my father, who was a definite racist himself. I wasn't permitted to bring black kids home to my house. It was okay for me to like encounter them in school, but it wasn't okay to bring them home or become friends with them. This is what, my father's edicts said, which never made any sense to me anyway, because these things are artificial barriers and definitions of people, because it's like it's a narrowing of your world. And when men started growing their hair out, that freaked out a whole entire generation of people, because they were now doing something that they didn't expect and that had never been done before as far as they were concerned, even though in the past men had had long hair. It's not like that was should have been a shock to anybody, but people get really like narrowed into their own reality and don't look outwards to see what greater reality might have looked like in the past, or whatever. And it seems silly at this point that people could get so incredibly frightened by such a small thing as the length of your hair. But hippies were being beaten up on a regular basis in certain towns across the United States, and because that they wore long hair. There were signs in the window saying no one with long hair was allowed into the restaurant, just like there had been signs about different races not being allowed in the restaurant, or different ethnic groups. I mean, that has been sort of a theme throughout history everywhere. There's always some group that's on the outs that everybody doesn't want to have anything to do with. The Irish were really on the outs for a long time when they first came to the United States. And, it's like, and that's part of the whole problem of everything, really, is that we're always looking outward to blame some other group for changing how we have to look at the world. People say, I'm tired of being politically correct. And I'm like, excuse me? They're just asking you to be sensitive and polite and thoughtful with your words and how you use them. That should not be difficult to do if you're a caring and open human being. That's what it's supposed to be about. So, yeah. So if you're going to walk this kind of a path, taking responsibility for your own words and your own actions is definitely the point. If you're going to expand your universe, that's part of how you expand your universe. You expand your ability to accept things that aren't you. And it can start off simply, like, with plants. Some people hate certain plants. I met several people who hate birds. They don't see any point in them. And like, they exist, they're part of reality. And depending on your attitude towards them, they can bring you all kinds of joy and wonder and laughter, or apparently piss you off and annoy you. And that's a choice. That's actually a personal choice that people make to have that kind of a reaction. Unless they've had some really traumatic event associated with those birds, in which case they can work through that too. It doesn't have to stay that way, which is the whole point of change. So self-talk has a lot of power. And again, we're talking about words. And the way we speak to ourselves about who we are and what we can and cannot do either enhances our ability to function and to engage with the universe at large, or hampers it greatly and turns us inward and makes us afraid to do anything. And so Ian used to do that a lot. He had a lot of negative self-talk. He doesn't do it as much, but he would start putting himself down just before going to sleep every single night, which just drove me completely nuts, because it's like, I'm sorry, you're talking about the man I love, and I wouldn't let anyone else talk about you like that. You need to stop talking to yourself like that. So when you find yourself speaking negatively to yourself, it's a good time to take a breath and stop and look at that. Why? Whose voice is that really? Is that a parent's voice, an ex-lover's voice, a teacher's voice, a religion's voice? Because generally speaking, negative self-talk really isn't your own voice. It just sounds like you because it's happening inside of your head. And so you have to look at that and start changing how you use words, especially when it's to yourself. It's not that I'm saying you don't look at yourself critically and decide that this is something I don't like about myself. That's only useful if you're going to do something about it and change it. If you're not going to change it, there's no point in looking at it and identifying it as something you don't like. If you choose to allow that definition to make you feel powerless to change, then you need new language, new approaches, new ways of thinking, and maybe some therapy to help you get out of a negative self-talk cycle. But it's like, they have energy. So I've noticed over the years that if I start on a negative attitude, like negative self-talk, look at all the negative stuff that's out there in the universe, and let's face it, there's plenty for us to find, then it sort of becomes an energetic spiraling down, sucking you in kind of thing. And it just sort of sucks you down into this place. And if you can catch yourself just as you're starting that downward spiral, and then stop and then reverse it, then you can actually get yourself out of it. However, if you don't catch it soon enough, you have to go all the way down the energetic hole to the bottom before you can shift directions and come back up. Complicated. The universe is complicated. All sorts of stuff going on out there. People are complicated. We're like a collection of all kinds of experiences and ideas and definitions and labels and things like that. So, you are not any single moment in time. No single moment in time should define who you are. A collection of moments may define your general energetic principles. But again, you can change those too. You know something about my history at this point if you've been watching my videos, and you know that I had a horrific childhood, and all kinds of negative stuff happened to me. And there's a lot of notions or ideas out there that made it very difficult for me to work through that, because in New Age thinking, I chose that. I decided to come into a horrible situation and to be tormented because I knew what I was doing when I was a spirit. And so the responsibility for everything that happened to me was mine, which is a crock, because there's other people in the equation, and their responsibility for how they act and how they choose to respond is theirs, not mine. And I was a child without power, because children don't have power to control their circumstances. I couldn't leave, although I tried. I ran away a couple times. But, it's like that idea, I consider a toxic notion. So if someone has told you that you chose these experiences yourself, and so you now have no room to complain, I would say evaluate that way of thinking and those words and what they actually mean and what they do to you and how they make you feel. Good words should make you feel empowered, not belittled, or hopeless or helpless. The idea is to get your power back and to become a more conscious co-creator of your own life, decide which way you want to go, instead of being stuck in forces beyond your control that you have no way to do anything or change anything about. So, back to the idea of using specific languages in order to do spells and making your spells more powerful, I would say this. If you don't understand the language that you're using, you have no basis of comprehension and energetic connection to the language, then you are kind of like trying to put water or take water out of the ocean a spoonful at a time. It's like the more capable you are of tuning into your natural power language, the one that works for you, that connects with you as a person, the less you have to fight in order to try and make the words have meaning and giving them power to move through the universe. Yeah. So anything that I say, any spells that I've recommended, chants or whatever, I don't expect people to necessarily follow them exactly. If you come up with a different series of words that make more sense to you or in your own native tongue, feel free to do that, because it's not about me and it's not about the book that was written that way. It's not it's the power is in you and in your connection to the words and how that activates different aspects of your energy field, your history, your future, and how it moves your energy out of you into another sphere of influence, like, the akasha or the mental or astral planes or even the physical plane. So trying to think. So the limiting language that we use for other people is that's one of the ways that we can dismiss someone from our reality, by figuring we know who they are and what they are, and it's like they're known quantity. I have had people use labels on me. When I was up in the Kispiox Valley, I was known as the Lady of the Valley, and I was doing mostly energy healing at the time. And I got word that since I was a healer, obviously, then I didn't do other things like dance. And whenever I hear something like that, that's a constricting label trying to define me as only being one thing and I can't be more than one thing, I get mad. So I went to the first local community dance I could find and danced like crazy in front of all the people who had declared that dancing was not something I would do because I was a healer. And so, like, it's limiting definitions of who you are. You can either ignore them or challenge them, but be aware of them. And I've had lots of funny things like that have happened. I was at a bus stop in Santa Cruz waiting for the bus. And there was a couple who were there, a man and a woman in this case, and they were not quite arguing, but sort of definitely loud and argumentative. And the woman said, "I can talk to you tonight at 6 o'clock." And the guy says, "How come we only ever talk when you want to talk, and we never talk when I want to talk? I want to talk now." And they were going back and forth and back and forth, and it was very annoying to, have them in my space. We're in public. And I finally got tired of hearing it. And so I looked at the man, I said, "I think she was perfectly clear that she will talk to you tonight at 6 o'clock. I was just repeating what she said. Then she got mad at me, and he got mad at me, and then they declared that I must be a lesbian because, one, I didn't shave my legs, and two, only a lesbian would stand up for a woman. And I was pretty irate. I'm something else to see if I'm angry. I don't get angry that often, but boy, when I do, I am a force to be reckoned with. And yeah. So the people on the bus got quite an earful about that whole thing. But again, that is a good example of somebody trying to limit my existence in their reality by determining that because of these certain things that I fall into this category and now they don't have to pay attention to me. And hey, they didn't have to pay attention to me either, but then they told me it was none of my business, and I'm like, you're at a bus stop in the open, standing next to me in my space. You have made it my business. So I'm sorry. That's the way it works. So I'm sure that you can look at your own experiences and find any number of examples of that kind of thing. And each one of those things is an opportunity to define yourself and not take someone else's definition of who you are. And this is one of the reasons why we have such a hard time communicating. So if I was a lesbian who didn't shave her legs and the only reason I was defending the woman was that, then I had a hidden agenda because I guess I would be a threat to the man, because maybe I was after his woman. I don't know. I'm just like, what is wrong with you people? And let's face it, most people are thoughtless when it comes to what they say. They're thoughtless with their words. And at the moment, one of the things I've been making a commitment to doing is to try to avoid the automatic violent rhetoric. And I catch myself doing it, just like everybody else. You see something, it's like, I wish they would drop dead, or somebody ought to, take them out, or anything like that. And I don't want to be defined in that way, because if it was turned around on me, I wouldn't like it. And it's not useful or helpful because I'm not involved in whatever that story is on the news that I'm watching. I don't know all the facts. No one ever does. Even the people that are in it often don't know all the facts because there's so many different pieces that are involved in any given situation. Trying not to jump to conclusions, because a lot of times we only get fed certain pieces, and other people's limiting definitions and labels of what they think is going on get repeated over and over again until we all think that's what reality happens to be. So that's a challenge that I set to myself when I find myself falling into that habit, because it's just all around me. And then I try to notice it and stop. That doesn't mean I beat myself up over the head with rose thorns and punish myself for failing in an instant to remember that that's not a thing I want to do. And yeah, so when you're doing this, when you're trying to change something that you don't like about yourself, or something you would like to do better or differently, again, negative self-talk comes into play when you don't succeed at what you're trying to do, and then you bash yourself over the head with your failure. It's just like there's all this stuff going on. So back to language, though, as a thing that allowed us to have a concept of time, is sort of an interesting thing, that without that ability to name and compare different phases and aspects of something, then we wouldn't be able to connect things together. So yeah, it gives us an opportunity, by using those kind of labels, to communicate with each other about the past, the present, and the future. And I thought this would be a good subject, since we just did the video on working with the Akasha, because this is a little like that on some level. And certainly the experience I started this video out with is a lot like that, because that was like unexpected and an amazing thing to just experience. And I wonder if maybe that also has to do with the stories of the, tree of life in so many different cultures. Because there was that tree. I called it the naming tree because I did not know what else to call it since I was there naming things. Under the tree, it was clearly the naming tree. Um, but in other mythologies and stuff like that, in so many different cultures, there's a tree at the center of their mythology that connects the past, the present, and the future, or worlds together. Other worlds and other realities and stuff come into play. And of course, we have our own personal genealogy trees, as it were, that connect us to our ancestors or our future um, progeny. And yeah, it's sort of like an interesting symbolic uh, whatever. Symbolic. Well, it's a good symbolism. I don't know what symbolic thing it is, but you get the drift. So, I mean, we're on an adventure. Our lives are an adventure of uncovering, discovering, defining, experiencing reality. And the more we can be in it and be a participant of it, the more we'll probably get out of it, I guess, is what I'm saying here. So, food for thought. And keep your questions coming, of course. And this Sunday is actually Ian's and my anniversary. We will be doing our live show, barring any unforeseen thing like an emergency visit or something like that. And sorry about that abrupt ending in the last one. That definitely was close, though, so it's a good thing I left when I did. Another 15 seconds, and it would have been not so good. And that's the thing, is like, I'm human, we're all human. I do dishes, I get sick, I go to work, I drive, I do stuff. I'm magic all the time, but not everyone could tell. I'm just, living a life like everybody else is. And I just happen to be, on occasion, more aware of what's going on around me than some other people might be. So, on that note, I guess I shall say goodbye. This has been Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So blessed be.